Philippians chapter 4, we're going to look today at verses 10, 11, 12, and 13. And for me, in my, however long I've been teaching, 20 plus years, this is my topic. I love this topic. And this morning, it just felt like we just scratched the surface. But at least we got to talk about it. I'm convinced that when we get into the meat of this section, we are looking at what is for many of us the missing ingredient in our lives. It's that thing that stops us from being the men or women or students that God could have us be. It's really a challenge, especially in the time and place and culture that we live in, and I think it's going to become really evident to you quickly what we're talking about. Let me remind you that Paul writes this letter from prison. He has experienced all sorts of hardship, and cumulative now he's been beaten and stoned and left for dead, and he's been isolated. He has so much what we would look at as challenge, difficulty, conflict around him. And yet in the midst of that, he declares that he's rejoicing, and he speaks, I think, then with credibility with us when he says rejoice. That's what we looked at last week in verse 4. Rejoice. How? In the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. And that is the theme of this book. The theme of this book is rejoicing or joy. So Paul comes back to it again and again. Well, let's read verse 10, 11, 12, and 13. And Paul's been talking here, and again, when he begins verse 10 with the word but, there's a bit of a connection here. He's been telling them to take all the things that they saw and learned in him and put them into practice, and they will have this peace of God. I rejoice, there's the phrase again, I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity. Now, let me just tell you a little bit of what's going on there. Paul has a wonderful relationship with his church, but over a period of about 10 years, they've kind of lost this connectedness, and now they've been reconnected. In fact, he uses the word revive, which is used in horticulture to speak of a plant that is flowering again. So that's kind of his picture of this relationship. And we're going to unpack that idea when we get in a couple of weeks to verse 14 through the rest of it. He said, not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be, and here's the word, content in whatever circumstance I'm in. I know how to get along with humble means. I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned, now the second time he's used that word, I have learned the secret of being filled, of going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Paul writes to these people. He writes again from prison. He's encouraged them to rejoice. He is so grateful that they have reconnected, and part of that is they have come to his rescue financially. And Paul says, listen, I want you to understand something. It's not that I speak from want, for I have learned. He tells us here in verse 11, I have learned to be content. Down there in verse 12, he said, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry. It's the same idea. When we get to this idea of contentment, the word that's translated in verse 11, content, is the only time that it appears in the New Testament, this particular word. And it is used in extra biblical Greek literature to describe a country that is self-sufficient, self-sustaining. I've learned to be content. I've learned to be satisfied, not in any human things. He's going to tell us true contentment here comes only from God. He's the one who enables us as believers to be satisfied with what we have and even content with the things we don't have. Now, what I find to be extraordinarily encouraging is the word learned. Apparently, contentment, whatever it is, and we'll define it in a minute, whatever it is, it's not just something that happens. It's not something that even happens naturally. I'm going to suggest to you it happens supernaturally. Paul said, I have learned to be content, and then he takes both extremes. He said, I have learned to live with humble means. Literally, I've learned to be hungry and not have much. He's talking here about a physical plane, earthly things, temporal things. He said, I've learned to barely get by, and I've learned to be prosperous. He said, I've lived in both of these extremes. When we were at the hospital yesterday, we were talking to Timmy's parents, and we were just going back and forth about when we were younger and first married and how difficult things were. And Susan and I were talking about, we used to just eat at night bread and gravy. And then like every third night we'd get chipped beef and have chipped beef and toast. And that's kind of what we had. We'd have a little bit of, some hot dogs fried up, and that's kind of what we lived on. And now we don't do that. We eat way better than that. And Paul said, you know what? I've lived with the bologna. That's what my dad used to fry. My dad used to fry bologna and cut it, and we'd eat that. Man, we thought we were going to heaven when he gave us, especially if there was cheese on it. Man, we learned that, and he said, and we learned to be in more prosperous times. Now, on the surface, if I have a choice, I'm going to take the prosperous one. But I want you to understand, based on what Paul's saying, and based on my own experience that goes yes to this, that prosperity is a test too, isn't it? The Scottish author Thomas Carlyle says, for every 100 people that can pass the test of adversity, there's only one that can pass the test of prosperity. So if I said to you, boy, God's going to test you today. Today at 5:17, God's going to test you in some major way. And let's go ahead, imagine what that might be. Well, your brain kind of runs wild, and you start to think of CAT scans and spots on lungs, and maybe it's a kid who dies, or a spouse who dies, or a parent, or we go to this catastrophic, difficult things. And those are huge challenges, right? Count it all joy, by the way, when you encounter those various trials. But there's also the test of prosperity. We got it. When things are tough, it's almost instinctive that we pray, isn't it? Boy, when you go to the doctor, here you go, this is really simple. You go to the doctor and you walk out and he's just told you, this is not good, you instinctively begin to pray. If he says, you know what, everything's fine, you whine about the copay. Right? What are we doing with a $25 copay? What is this? I'm getting ripped off. I'm moving to Canada. Okay? Go, little bird, go. We'll be happy without you. We'll do just fine. Okay? But isn't that true? So if everything's fine, I'm thinking about 1,000 other things. What about the Diamondback game? What about this? Why isn't this 101? By the way, why isn't the 101 fixed? But whatever those things might be, my mind just goes to all those things. But in the midst of that adversity, I instinctively pray. But that test of prosperity. And this really becomes important for us, and we're going to unpack this in a bit, because most of us in this room are not just prosperous, we're rich. And there's a whole test that comes with that. Paul says, I've learned this. I've learned to live with a lot. I've learned to live with a little. I've learned the secret. In fact, verse 13, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Now, Paul's not talking here about some sort of Superman that can leap tall buildings in a single bound, or he's faster than a speeding bullet, or more powerful than a locomotive. I don't know how long ago, it was a while ago, the SC quarterback wore a little towel that had Philippians 4:13 on it, this verse. And I think he lifted it a little out of context to make it work for the football season. What Paul's talking about here is, I can do, and again, it means literally, be strong, or to have power, to have resources. I can do all things. What are the all things? I can live in all these circumstances. Why? Because he strengthened me. Isaiah 40 verse 29. He gives strength to the weary. To him who lacks might, he increases power. Though youths grow weary and tired, vigorous young men stumble badly. Yet those who wait upon the Lord will gain a new strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They'll run, not get tired. They'll walk, not get weary. In Paul's own life, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, beginning in verse 7, he talks about this moment where he said there was this thorn in the flesh, a messenger from Satan that tormented me. And he says, I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me. But God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I would rather boast about my weakness so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I am well content with weakness and insults and distress and persecution and difficulties for Christ's sake. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong. That's exactly what Paul's saying here. I can do all things. I can hang in there in the tough times. I can hang in there in the prosperous times because I understand that it's not about me and my determination. It's about God as He works in my life. I got it. That's what Paul's saying. And he uses these words that are pretty provocative. Boy, we want the secret. Isn't that's that little book out that everybody's buying. Not you all, but a bunch of other people. The Secret. We all want to, what's the secret? This would be a perfect infomercial. Right here. The secret. The secret to doing all things. I'm out of time now. But for 1995. That kind of thing. We could do it. Well, what's the secret? Paul says, I'm not going to charge you for this. I'll give it to you free. The secret is, if I'm in Christ, I rejoice in Christ. I have learned to be content. Satisfied. Satisfied with very little. Satisfied with a whole bunch. Now, in my life, this has been a whole concept that has been very important to me. I found it for me, and I'm going to put Susan in this canoe with me here. For Susan and me, this has been really key to a lot of the things that we have done. I am absolutely convinced that for many Christians, this idea of contentment is the missing ingredient in their life. I find tons of men and women who would say that there's some sort of dissatisfaction in their Christian life, and when you sit and you talk to them, you realize that that's what's missing is they haven't been able to separate these two things, this temporal from the eternal. And the temporal is overpowered. And inertia in the temporal will just pull you into all sort of dissatisfaction. It'll get you in a game that's almost impossible to get out of. It's the very reason that a guy would get $1 or $2 or $3 or $4 million and then go get, rather than take care of debt and be done with it, go find $5, $6, $7, $10 more million worth of debt. Why would I just keep going? Is there a point there? In fact, now you can sense it. If I communicate this well, there should be a lot of tension in the room when we're going through this. I have taught, in fact, let me invite you to turn to the right, if you would. Turn to the right through 1st and 2nd Thessalonians to 1 Timothy chapter 6. Worn out in my Bible, and some of yours too, I'm sure. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6. And I have taught this section, and I've had different titles that I've given to it. At one point, I called this section, Put a Lid on Your Dreams. And that generated all sorts of response from people. In fact, I had people really accusing me of saying, this is almost anti-American. And this is not a call, by the way, to mediocrity or apathy. It's simply saying we got to take our lives and the things that we're engaged in, work, school, whatever they are, and we have to put them in their proper context. And we have to begin to see them as God sees them. And apart from that, they will become, here you go, this is kind of the key, they will become idols. They will suck you in. You will worship them. You will find your identity there. And this whole idea here of contentment and worldliness, when I'm into that worldliness, it is a narcotic. I can't get enough of it. And it'll never satisfy. Those are perfect illustrations. Well, look at verses 6, 7, and 8 of 1 Timothy 6. So again, when we see that, we know there's a connection. Sorry to do that to you. But he's just been talking about false prophets and false teachers who are in this whole thing and they're looking for a buck. But godliness actually is a means of great gain when it's accompanied by contentment. For we brought nothing into the world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. If we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. Now, I think it's important here, put some definition on some terms. Godliness, and the definition I'm using, A consistent, genuine, authentic walk with God. It's reverence for God. It's right living with God. It's this idea of being in the Lord. Godliness plus contentment, they're coupled together there. And again, here's Webster's. A feeling of satisfaction with one's possessions or status or situation. In his book, The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment, Jeremiah Burroughs writes this: Christian contentment is that sweet, inward, quiet, gracious frame of spirit which freely submits to and delights in God's wisdom and fatherly disposal in every condition. In other words, I'm satisfied with what God's doing. You see how this could be misunderstood real quickly, don't you? You could really quickly shift this into apathy. What he's saying is, he's not saying it's wrong to strive for more. He's not even saying it's wrong to want more. He's saying, but there ought to be a satisfaction with what I do have. And we're going to stay completely in the material realm today, but there's application way beyond this for your life and mine. I even, as I look at verse 6, I even put it in the form of an equation. So like 2 plus 2 is 4. Godliness plus contentment equals great gain. Equals great gain in God's economy. Whatever it is that God says is of value, God says is important, God says is of worth. If I want to have a significant equivalent in the spiritual realm of a financial statement, he says, I got to have this godliness and I have to have this contentment, and I can't separate them. And here's my thing. That's why I say it's the missing ingredients, and we don't talk about it much. You can go to most churches on most Sundays, and you'll hear somebody talk about godliness. You'll rarely hear anybody talk about contentment, but they go together. Is godliness important? Sure it is. Is it more important than contentment? It may be of more value than contentment, but I need them both in God's economy to have great gain. And then he says, in verse 8, if we have food and covering, with those we should be content. What he's talking about here are the basic needs of life. And this is particularly frustrating. He puts absolutely no definition to it. He simply says, if you have food. That can be hot dogs and Jiffy muffins and fishy crackers, or it can be filet and baked potatoes, bread. Let's hang in this one for a while. Ice cream, brownie, hot brownie with ice cream and caramel, and a few chopped up cashews. Woo! That'll be good. See that? He didn't make any difference there. He said, here's your food. Food. Man, you got a hot dog, you got a filet, it doesn't matter. You be satisfied. Covering. He's talking about clothes and a place to live. You got some clothes. You know, it may be something. I had on the other day, I had on a really cool pair of shorts and a great shirt. And, I thought I really looked good, though no one said I looked good, so that's a little bit puzzling, but that's okay. I just assumed they didn't notice it. But my shorts cost $12 and my shirt cost $9. And yet I've also been in places where you get a pair of shorts for $125 and a shirt for $125. And they're fine. I'm not making any judgments. I'm not making any judgments here. He's saying whether you're in a studio apartment or a 5,000 square foot house, 6,000. Whatever it is, whatever one, you be content. You start to feel some tension here. Because he's just going to leave it wide open. So now we begin to even have conflict one with another. Like, how much house? How much car? Do these things matter? Does it matter where you live and what you drive and what you wear? Let me answer it. Yes, it does. But I can't tell you where to draw that line. There is this huge, and it's an election year. You probably haven't noticed yet. It's an election year. And in an election year, you're going to have to hear about this thing called the American Dream. Now, if you Google American Dream, and you go through, I don't know what I went through, like 12,000 entries or something. I'm teasing. Like a dozen. As you went through, here's what nobody can tell me what it is. We all use that term. Every presidential candidate will say, wait a minute, I want the American dream. What is it? And when we start to define it, it's almost always in a material or temporal sense. You know, a chicken in every pot. Used to be a car in every garage, but now we got so much junk in there that we can't get the car in there. So we got all that other stuff. We got to get all those other things out of the way. It's something material. Every kid has to have an education. Okay. But MCC's fine. They don't have to go to Harvard to have a good education. I almost said Tucson, but I mean, you got to set the bar somewhere. Okay. MCC is fine. You see that? So that gets into a whole other thing. But now you begin to feel this. Now I'm going to make it, this is an observation that from my own personal experience. I have rarely met anyone who is successful in the world's economy and equally successful in God's economy. It's as though what Jesus said is right. You can't serve two masters. You got to pick. You can do really good in one and okay in the other. But it's really hard to do really well in both of them. Because it takes a lot of time and energy and effort in the world's economy. Nobody just falls into this. When you see people who've made a lot of money, almost always, I want you to understand, they work really, 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 really hard for it. And it takes a lot of energy. But there's that tension. It's okay. It's okay. I want to hang in here because I don't want to be misunderstood. It's okay to go out there tomorrow and do your best. To do your best at school, your best at work. That's okay. That's good. That honors and glorifies God. But the question is that where I'm finding my identity? When my head hits the pillow at night, what am I thinking about? Balance sheets, accounts payable, accounts due. What am I thinking about? I think this is really tough stuff. Now, here's an observation that I had, and it took me a while to get to it, is that this 3 verses work a lot better if you take out verse 7. Let me read it without verse 7. Godliness is actually a means of great gain when it's accompanied by contentment. So contentment's the theme. Verse 8. If we have food and covering with those, we should be content. You gotta admit, baby, that flows. So if I was editing, if Paul brought me this letter and said, I want to fire this letter off to Timothy, you got any corrections? I would say, delete verse 7. Now, here's the problem. Paul didn't even write the book, did he? The Holy Spirit wrote the book. So verse 7's in there for a reason. And I mean, it used to drive me nuts. Because I'm going, it screws up the flow. I'd even teach it and just kind of read through it and go down to verse 8. And one day, this is one of those really, really great moments. I was at Forest Home. There's a platform like this. There's a big old screen like that. Verse 6, 7, and 8 are up there. And I'm just kind of working my way through. And I'm going to kind of move over verse 7. And all of a sudden, I'm right teaching it. And I went to the people that were there and said, oh my gosh, I see why verse 7's there. That's been driving me crazy. I see why verse 7's there. You'll never be content unless you understand you came with nothing and leave with nothing. If you operate under the illusion that there's any way, shape, or form that you can take any of this with you, or that this has any eternal value, you'll never get away from it. You have to understand that this stuff, in and of itself, though it may be great, and it's here to enjoy for sure, it's not having any eternal value unless I use it for God's glory. It's a theme all through Scripture. Job 121, naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I'll return. Ecclesiastes 5:15, as he came naked from his mother's womb, so he will return. He can take nothing from the fruit of his labors that he can carry in his hand. There's that verse again and again and again and again and again. So here's what God's saying to you and me. There has to be this sense where you put a lid on your dreams materially, and you say that's enough. It's okay to want more, but I'm not going to live for more. I enjoy going to the hospital a lot. I got no problems going to a hospital, and I like all sorts of things. So yesterday we were there, and I went down to get something to drink. We hadn't been there very long, and so I was getting the coffee or something, and there was a lady there. And I just was talking to her. She was looking. She was really kind of cool because she was looking. She was really scouting this out. You could tell she wanted one of these rolls or donuts or muffins. I mean, she really wanted it. So I couldn't leave it alone. I said, "Boy, those look good, don't they?" She said, "They just look too big. I don't think I could eat a whole one." I said, "Well, you could give me half." She said, "Well, I was thinking maybe I'd just eat half and take the rest home." I said, "Oh." So I said, why are you here? And she said, "Oh, my brother's dying. From Atlanta, my brother's dying." I said, "Oh, wow. I'm sorry." She said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, my daughter's upstairs and she's going to have a baby a couple hours." And she said, "It's the cycles of life, isn't it?" And I said, "That's exactly what it is. It's a cycle of life." I remember one day over at Green Acres doing this funeral, and we're at the graveside. There is the hole. It's the most somber time of a funeral. There is the hole. And there's the casket. And they start to lower this baby down in there. It is a somber moment. And I'm watching this guy going down, and to my right is his daughter and his two-week-old grandchild. I love that. Here's what God says to us. In Job, Ecclesiastes, here in 1 Timothy 6, he says it over and over again. You got to remember this right here. Got to remember this deal. Got to remember that that's you. The only aren't going to take anything with you. Because if you think any of this is going to transition, all of a sudden, the acquisition, the accumulation, the retention of it becomes an obsession. It's just really hard to not get sucked into this, right? You don't need to answer out loud at all. But you know that's true, don't you? You don't need to answer out loud, but I just want you to know that I know that you know it's true. That's what I want. Because that's the basis of this. When this is all done, when you're sitting up there like this lady's brother, when you're sitting up there in the hospital dying, you're not going to give a rip about this deal you're working on. It's going to be faith, family, friends. That's it. Are there some exceptions? Yes, I've had people email me exceptions, and there are some of them. But by and large, it's faith, family, and friends, isn't it? Now, how big is this whole pole? It's really interesting. Look where Paul goes here. Okay? If we have food and covering, with those we should be content. Verse 9. Those who, and this is really key, those who want to get rich. He's not talking about rich people here. You could be dirt poor, be here today, but you want to get rich. All you're thinking about is stuff. You want to get rich. They fall into a temptation and a snare. It's like a wild animal here that's caught in a trap. And many foolish and harmful desires which plunge men into ruin. That word that's translated plunge there is also in Luke's gospel used to describe a ship that's sinking to the bottom of the sea. That's what these things do. They pull you into destruction. Verse 10, so popular and familiar is this verse that'll pop up on Jeopardy every once in a while. For the love of money. Now, well, let's make sure we got it now. He's not saying money, right? The love of it. So don't go and say it's this rich people, these doggone rich people. No, it's anybody who loves money. You may have a whole bunch of them, you may have very little of it. But the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil. One of the authors says this, the love becomes the root from which develops all sorts of evil. It's hard to imagine a sin that hasn't been committed for the love of money. Such love causes people to indulge themselves, show off, distort justice, take advantage of the poor, lie, cheat, steal, and murder. It's that love of money. It's that love of money that will get us in these traps. You'll find yourself in this thing and you're like, how in the world did I get there? Almost every year, usually around holiday time, there's the story of some little old lady in Sun City who's been ripped off for her life savings. And it's a tragic story. I got it, okay? Got it. It's a tragic story. But it's always a scam artist, and it's always in this context. Watch out for this scam. Okay, here's what I want you to see. The only reason the scam works is because she's a greedy little old lady. That's what never gets in the story. The scam doesn't work. I mean, think about it. Okay, you go get us $3,500, and as soon as I get this account freed up in Zimbabwe, I'll give you $3 million. You think this is happening? You think this is really going to take place? It's that scam. Why does it work? Why, 20 years ago, were people buying something called junk bonds? What'd you think? What'd you think was going to happen when somebody says, I'll loan you money to get in this house at like 2%? I know the market's at 7 or 8, but I'll get you in there at 2. And heck, you don't even have to, well, let's see. Like 3 years from now, we'll bump it to 58. What are you thinking, man? What are you thinking when you mortgage your future for an extra bedroom? Another garage? Why does that work? Man, we love it. And we find all sorts of ways to rationalize that. All of our friends do it. Gosh, this is hardly nothing. I know people and they have this, and this. I have people, and it makes me sad, but I understand it, who will talk about coming to church here, and they'll say it's so intimidating because everybody there has it together, and they're driving these big cars, and they have these great clothes, and but that church is made up of rich people. And every Sunday I go, really? Let me check that bulletin. I don't see any of it. Oh, here's some giving. We're made up of a bunch of rich. We are by one standard. But do you understand when you go out in the parking lot that a leased past due 6-month Lexus looks like one you pay cash for? We can really go deep in this. We can really hang in this one. But I don't want to get there. We may come back here in a couple of weeks because it's just too good to be true. Look at verse 17. Instruct those who are rich in this present world. Now, we got a problem right there. What's the problem? What's it mean to be rich? That's a total subjective term. And most of us will define it as anybody who has more money than us. What's rich? Him. We were playing golf a couple of weeks ago at a really nice club. Really nice. Very nice club. And a friend of mine lives up there, and so we were playing there. And they got all these houses. And I would say all these houses, I'm just guessing now, I would say the low end there would have been about 750 million right in there. And then it would go up from there. And I'm talking to some guys about this club, and we're on one tee box, and they said, oh, we're not rich. And they point to the club over the hill. He said, that's where the rich people are. They're all over there, and they are typically more expensive over there. I don't know if they're any richer. We love that. I sat with a guy who said he had $10 million. That was his net worth, $10 million. And we're talking about this. He said, oh, I'm not rich. He's rich. He's rich. I don't know what Bill Gates does. He's just in trouble when this guy, somebody's richer than me, God. And that's what we do. So you can easily go instruct those who are rich. Well, come on, let's see, what do we got? We got 9 minutes left. Come on, I don't need this. This isn't for me. This is for you, man. Instruct those who are rich. Rich what? In this present world. He's going to contrast that with those who are rich in the world hereafter. Instruct those who are rich in this present world. 2 things not to do. 1, don't be conceited. 2, don't fix your hope on the uncertainty of riches. Don't be conceited. When you have stuff, and some are very subtle about it, but when you have stuff, you think you're pretty good. Don't you? Sure you do. Well, you kind of, but you do. I've been there. I've been sitting in a meeting where you got 50 salespeople, and you can pick out the top 10 from the bottom 10. I had a friend that brought me in to talk to his sales staff. There were about 50 people in there. And I would go in and say, good morning, my name's Tom. And all of a sudden you have people go, Tom. His name's Tom. Good morning, Tom. Well, there's the bottom 10 right there. Okay? They're writing down everything. They don't want to miss a thing. And the top 10 are going, Tom spelled backwards, Mott. How long is this going to take? You can just see it. You cocky little thing. And because you think you've done something, you think you put this together. You did the performa. You did the package. You did the prospectus. You put it all together. You can't even take a breath unless God lets you take it. Watch out. Watch out. Don't you be conceited or fix your hope on the uncertainty of riches. Larry used to say it this way, that riches are like a greased pig, meaning we get this stuff and we squeeze it and it's gone. And I think there's that aspect to it. We understand that, right? We understand that markets go down. We understand there's cycles, blah, blah, blah. I think it's bigger than that. I think it's the uncertainty of riches, meaning we're trusting this stuff to do something it can't do. We're trusting this stuff to make us happy. We're trusting this stuff to make us content. We're thinking, we got this marriage that's absolutely in the toilet. Nobody would want it. We'll get a bigger house. Susan and I, when we were dating and then married, and we weren't doing very well. So what do you do in a marriage when it's not going well? We decide to have a baby. How stupid is that? We'll just bring another poor soul into this screwed up mess that we have. Stupid. So we start to fix our hope on the uncertainty of riches. If I just get there. Haven't you been there? Just, it's okay. Just admit it. Just admit it to yourself anyway. Haven't you been there? If I just get that house, I'm telling you, I've been, I don't do it anymore. I gave it up a long time ago. But it seemed like every weekend we were moving somebody. And every time it was the same thing. We'd move somebody in, and then they'd get pizza and Diet Coke, and we'd sit around and they go, we could live here forever. We could live here forever. We could live here forever. And 3 years later, they're calling, going, hey man, you want to help us move? I'm going, are you downsizing? No. It's every time. It's every time. Right? Maybe I'm the only one, but I'm telling you, that's a huge battle. I fight that battle. He's saying, watch out. Watch out. He's not saying there's anything wrong with stuff. He's not saying there's anything wrong with working hard. He's not saying there's anything wrong with getting it. He's just saying, how are you going to use it? And first off, don't you think you're going to find your identity in that? Proverbs 11:28. He who trusts in his riches will fall. Proverbs 23:4. Do not weary yourself to gain wealth. Cease from your consideration of it. When you set your eyes on it, it's gone. Now, right there, we can kind of summarize this. This is pretty cool when you start to do studies and cross-reference. In Hebrews 13:5 and 6, the author of Hebrews kind of summarizes all that we've talked about. He says this, let your character be free from the love of money. Be content in what you have. For God has said, I'll never desert you, nor will I forsake you. So we can say confidently, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. Here's how we said it when we studied the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He's going to take care of everything I need. Now here's the problem. Sometimes I want the filet, and He meets it with the old tube steak. Yeah? Sometimes I want the house, and maybe not even a bunch. Just, all we want, we got 3 kids. All we want is a bedroom for each kid. Is that asking too much? Sometimes it is. Do you know that for years, 2 kids lived in 1 bedroom all through this whole wide world? When I was in college, I was sleeping in a room, in a bed with my brother. I might have screwed him up, but I did fine with it, Didn't bother me one bit. Oh, I gotta have that bedroom. And then you give them their own bed. Here you go. Tell me if this sounds like you're stuck on stupid. You give them your own bedroom, you put a computer in there, you put a TV in there, you put an iPod in there, anything with an I is in there, you put an iPhone in there, and then you complain because the kid never comes out and interacts with you. Why would he? How are you going to punish that kid? Go to your room? That's the biggest thing you can do to me. You might as well send me to the mall. Then I YouTube, and now the whole world's watching me. Man, think about this. And you're busting your pick for that stuff because you think it's going to make you happy, or you believe these kids will be happy, and nobody's going to be happy. Now, here's the positive side of this. Don't fix your hope on the uncertainty of riches, but fix it on God. He supplies all you need. What should you do? Instruct them to be good rich in good works, generous, ready to share, storing up for themselves treasures of a good foundation for the future. Let me tie it together. By the way, when we finish up the study of Philippians, we're gonna study the book of Ecclesiastes. So this is, oh my gosh, just gonna be out in the parking lot, just slicing your wrists on the way to the car, passing out razor blades and tourniquets on the way to the. But here's what Solomon says. See if this doesn't ring a bell. We're gonna drive this theme home until we get it. And you know why? Because we're living in a time, you better figure it out. Me too. We better. I don't want to say you. We. I'm driving the other day down Rio Salado. There's a part by the Tempe marketplace. There's a Shell station, and diesel fuel was $4.19 a gallon, man. It ain't going down. And you feel that tension, don't you? You know what? That's okay. Let me read you these 5 verses from Ecclesiastes 5:10. Whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owner except to feast his eyes on them? The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of a rich man permits him no sleep. I've seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of the owner, or wealth lost through misfortune. Naked a man comes from his mother's womb, and as he comes he must depart. He takes nothing from his labor that he can carry in his hand. So what's he say? Store up treasure, not in this world, but in God's kingdom. Where your treasure is. How great is that? Where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. We can flip it around. Where your heart is, where your treasure is going to be. If I start to just kind of follow you around, or I take a look at my own life, and I can just go and take my BlackBerry and a schedule. I don't have a BlackBerry, but if I did, a BlackBerry and a schedule, and I can take my checkbook, and I can lay them side by side, I'm going to learn a lot about what's really important to you. Because where you put your time and where you put your money is going to tell me where your heart is. And we fight that. And I don't think it ever goes away, myself. It certainly hasn't in my life. We fight that. And we have to listen to those words of Jesus over and over and over again. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? That's a winner. That's a guy who got it all. Jesus is saying, what's the point here? You're knocking yourself out. And there's maybe salvation at stake, or maybe even bigger. You're in the kingdom. You're a child of the King. You know Christ. But your time, your energy, your effort, your resources, your thoughts, your creativity are all building your kingdom and not His. And you're never, ever going to move out of that until you come to grips with the fact you came with nothing and you're leaving nothing. You're going to leave, and you're going to leave it to these kids. You know what these kids are going to do? They're going to fight over it. You got all this junk, and they're going to fight over it. That's why if you're smart, here's how you know if an old sick person is smart. If you go into their house and there's masking tape on stuff with people's names on it, they're smart. And just settle it. Here you go. Bob. Bob gets this piano. You get the bottle. Mama always loved Bob more. Okay? You see that? I love that. That's contentment. And I hope, I made a list. You don't have to copy this down at all. But I just made a list. Kind of money, what it does, kind of my summary of this. It tempts me to be greedy. It can become an obsession. It becomes a source of false security. It's an idol. It becomes my identity. It's seductive. It's consumptive. Now, stuff is okay. What obviously Paul's saying here is that there's an appropriate way to approach my stuff. What I do with it, how I handle it. And my intention was not to really go there, but I think we'll unpack that. I think we just need to go back. I love this. And again, you just have to indulge me, I guess. This is autobiographically, man, this is me. Because if you don't figure this out, you're just wandering around. You're just going to be a deal junkie, and you're going from thing to thing to thing, and you're never going to have enough. Because there's always somebody with more, and they become the excuse. You think I got a lot? Have you seen them? You think this is a nice car? Have you seen them? Well, when you run into somebody tomorrow at Costco and they say, what did Tom talk about? Don't you say, Tom's out there putting down anybody who drives a Lexus. I'm not doing that. Or somebody who's got nice cars or houses or boats or clothes. I'm not doing that. That's between you and God, man. You got to figure that out. You can be driving a beat up old Volkswagen dump that's 400 years old. You can be driving that and be proud of how humble you are and be just as screwed up as the rich guy. What I'm saying is this is serious and it's between you and God, and you better get it figured out, because the godliness is never going to come forth in you, the consistent, authentic living, until you got this issue settled. Okay? We'll pick up there. I was going to go on, but I want to unpack this, because it means being content with the spouse God's given you. Oh my gosh. And the kids God's given you. Uh-oh. I think we do. I think we need to hang in this for a while. So we'll spend a little. I'm having fun if no one else is, so that's good. Father, thank you for this truth. Will you allow us to see you and know you? And then to fight this battle and just fight it and fight it and fight it and never send up the white flag of surrender. God, we will battle to keep it fresh in our mind that we came with nothing, we'll leave with nothing. God, let us be content. For your honor and your glory, we pray in Christ's name. Amen.